All right, welcome to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm excited to be able to bring another episode to you guys. Today, I have a very special guest, a dear friend, I call it a homie. We've had, several encounters and I've got to, hear bits and pieces of her story, but I'm excited to hear her story today and, kind of just have a conversation and, ask questions, about her journey and hopefully that it can be helpful to some of you guys that are my listeners and alumni and workers out there, and hopefully you guys can take something from this and, be inspired or motivated or just enjoy the show. So without further ado, I'm going to let my guest introduce herself.
Well, hey everyone. I just wanted to say thank you to Michael for letting me be a part of the podcast that he's created. Really proud of him for having this opportunity to really share everyone's stories with, all of you, but also being able to share my story. My name is Heaven. I'm a social worker and a case manager at a behavioral health hospital currently in Chicago, Illinois. I was in the system on and off for about 12 years, and I went to school and got my master's, and here I am now.
Thank you, Heaven. I don't know if you've listened to any of my other shows, but I like to dive deep in there to kind of get a synopsis, or a storyline, to say the least, for the listeners, and then get into the expertise and experience. So taking you back to your time in and out of the foster care system, if you don't mind me asking, was it due to abuse or neglect?
It was actually due to drug use by both parents.
Okay.
Drug use and alcoholism.
Okay, so how old were you when you entered the system?
A little bit over one.
Okay, so you was young.
Yep, I was a little wee one.
Yeah, so in your experience, were you in foster homes? Like, what did that look like for yourself?
So I actually, like I said, it was kind of on and off. When I first entered the system, I actually entered the system in Ohio.
Okay.
So it wasn't even in Michigan at first. So me and my older brother, we spent 5 years in a foster home with a wonderful woman who took so many kids into her home. And then we ended up back with, mom. Dad wasn't in the picture my whole life. And then there are times where I would go back into the system, but I would be able to live with, like a family member or something.
Okay.
There was a situation where I ended up back with that, like my very original foster mom, back in Ohio. So it was on and off between foster homes and family members between Michigan and Ohio.
So if you could give me like just a range, so you entered into, like, I guess I like to say, the child welfare system. If you entered into the child welfare system at like one, did you age out of it, or were you with family, at 18? Like, what did that look like?
So I was actually adopted at 16.
Okay.
And then I was asked to leave their home at 18. And that was the summer before I went to college. So I just stayed with like a friend and his family for like that last couple like month or two before I went off to college. And then they helped me get to college, and then kind of was on my own, like for real then.
Okay. So just going back, so you experienced the foster care system at a very young age, experienced foster homes, but also bounced around to maybe some kinships, guardianships with family members, and so forth. Around 16, you got adopted. So how was that for you? Like, how was that adoption process? If we could dive to that, like what, did you like it? Did you not like it? Or was it just a place to go? Like, kind of help me understand and paint a picture for us.
So I actually was living with a great aunt, and my great aunt sat me and my younger brother down and said, basically, like, I can't take care of you guys anymore. It's tough on my health.
Right.
So we were in the system, we were in, like, kinship. So we were taken out of her home and placed in a foster home, which was a very, very hard process in itself, because at this time, I was 14, like 13 or 14. My little brother was, 3 years younger than me. And I remember sitting in, our caseworker's office, like sitting on the floor, like near her cubicle, and her just making calls like over and over again. And I remember at one point she kind of looked at me and she's like, I'm going to be straight up with you. She goes, I know you're older, like this isn't anything new to you. She goes, I'm having a rough time finding placement for you. There's lots of, foster homes that are willing to take your younger brother in, but it's hard to place a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of came down to where it was like, I told her, I was like, that's fine, place him wherever he needs to go. Like, I want the best life for him. And then my choice would have been like a group home or a residential or something.
Mm-hmm.
But she kept bugging this one family, and they're like, yeah, fine, whatever. We'll take him for like a couple nights. A couple nights turned into weeks, months, years, and then finally adoption. And the adoption was hard. It was very, very hard. There were times where my mom was very close to getting us back, and she didn't show up to her right termination court case because she felt like we would have a better life with them than her. And that may have been the case at the time, but that's tough when you're that young, to hear like, great, my mom doesn't want me again. That's your thought process. But the toughest part really with the whole adoption is my adopted parents were not educated in trauma. They didn't get the right education and training they needed to take care of older kids, let alone ones that have been through hell and back.
Right.
And so it was a lot harder than you see in movies when like kids go and get adopted by these amazing families. It wasn't like that. So
okay, and I'm gonna do something a little bit different with this episode. I think you're probably the first person I've had on here that was adopted. Excuse my voice changing. I'm going through puberty again, I guess. So just speaking on that, you didn't have the best experience throughout the adoption. I mean, overall, I think we can both say, the adoptive parents, probably did their best, what they could, but there was a lack of knowledge there, and there probably was some differences there throughout that experience. So speaking on that part, what advice could you give to foster parents that may be listening right now off of your own experience of things that could have been better?
I'd say find services and resources, maybe find some support groups with other foster parents, where you can really get that trauma informed care, because you never know what your kids are gonna come from. They might know some stuff because of the caseworker, but a lot of the times some things kind of get swept under the rug or are not talked about, and you never know what to expect. And just because one kid has gone through one thing and reacts this way and another kid goes through the same thing, they're not going to probably react the same way. And then also just really fighting for, advocating for your kids' like wellness. Really trying to find the best therapist and counselor for them, not just signing them up and going, yep, this is good enough. They might not click with that therapist. They may not, be comfortable with that therapist. Really trying to find the best support for them, because unfortunately you're not going to be able to help them as much as you would like. I mean, as crappy as that sounds, you're going to need a lot of outside help too, and that's okay, because it takes a village.
Right. Thank you for that. And I hope, to the listeners who, the foster parents that may be listening, I hope that's helpful, and insightful. Well, I want to go back a little bit, so throughout your, experience in and out of the child welfare system, kinships and so forth, did you go to therapy? Was there any kind of mental health, or care going on there, and how, if there was, were you receptive to it during those young ages?
I don't remember having a therapist when I was living in Ohio, but I do know when, I was living with my aunt in 8th grade. I remember we were required to have a therapist, who I believe was like hired by the state or something, like worked with like DHHS. But I wasn't a fan of her. It was very well, how does that make you feel? Like as a kid, well, everything pisses me off. Everything makes me mad. I'm hurt. I'm angry. Okay, well, how does that make you feel? That's not very helpful. So, once I moved in with my adopted parents, they did try and find me a therapist, but it seemed like every time we got me a new therapist, the therapist would like quit or, move to like a different area. And so, a lot of that trauma of abandonment and never being good enough for anyone, a lot of that was like dug up a lot, even though that wasn't the situation. It was always like, well, everyone leaves me, even my therapist, even the people that are supposed to help me. At that time in my mind, it was really, everyone leaves. So I really didn't get all the mental health, behavioral health help that, I should have gotten while I was young.
Okay. So fast forwarding, 18, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said like, your adoptive parents was like, you can't stay here anymore. Like how did that transpire?
Because I did come into their home at a later age, around like 14, about little after the middle of my freshman year of high school. They, like I said, they weren't educated on how to best handle older kiddos, ones that have gone through, intense trauma and that kind of stuff. They, the summer after I graduated, they were like, we really don't know what to do with you anymore or for you anymore. Like, I feel like we've helped you the best way we can. We don't know what to do anymore. So at the time, it felt like there was no option but to leave. But now going back to, talking to them, it would, in their mind, it was like, well, we're giving you a choice to leave or stay. But at that time, I didn't see it like that. And even now, I don't see it like that. So I did leave, and lived with a guy I was seeing and his parents at that time, and stayed with them for about a month or two. And then they helped me get to college because I was already accepted. So they just helped me transition up to school.
Okay. Oh man, that I can just only imagine that experience. And I mean, everything, us as human beings, everything is up for interpretation in any kind of conversation. So at 18, I can only imagine in your shoes, I adopt a parent like, well, I don't know what to do with you, I mean, on one hand, I get it. But on the other, as a foster parent, as an adoptive parent, these are things, unfortunately, that's your job to know. Like if you want to still support me at 18, if you, to be trauma informed, unfortunately, that is the duty, that is the job, that is the calling that you have chosen to do, and I respect all foster parent and adoptive parents, but if I could say here from your story and stuff like that, I hope if they continue to foster or adopt that things may have changed. They may have adapted. They may have gotten some classes to become more trauma informed, and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure your story is similar to others and stuff like that. Unfortunately, but that comes in with education. That comes in with not just trying to work on the prevention side and educate the people, but also there needs to be a lot of education and the fostering and adoptive side, because unfortunately for some of the homes that we do have that are still up and going, some of them are a little bit older, so they got their licenses, and so no, a long time ago, and it wasn't all these different classes as we see now, and all these different processes and stuff like that. They were, in a state of emergency of trying to get home, almost where we're at now. So in saying that, I kind of want to go into these next steps now. 18, you're out, you had to figure out stuff and so forth to get to college and everything. Now, how was that journey as a young adult getting into college? Did you have supports? Did you have, friendships? Like, how did you deal with life in that transition?
It was tough. College isn't easy in itself, but, I didn't even think about going to college as a foster kid, who's going to help me pay for it, who's going to, support me. But, I had a really good high school counselor who believed in me and really pushed me. And so I applied to one college, just one, and got in. And so when I did go to that school, I actually went in blind. We had a graduating class in my high school of about 156, and only one other kid went to the same college as me. And we weren't even friends, so it's not like I was like, yeah, I'll know someone there. It's like, yeah, I know you, but that's about it. And so I went in really blind. I didn't know anyone, and I was also a little over 3 hours away from home. So, I really kind of shoved myself into life, and I'm like, grow up, like get your shit together. So, I don't know if I'm supposed to cuss. I apologize. But I mean, there was a really amazing scholarship program at Fair State University. It's called the Pharisees Initiative Program, and it's specifically for kids, who are in the system or who have aged out of the system or were adopted or, have lost both their parents and, are emancipated, who don't have, anyone that has taken over a guardianship, anyone like that. And so I got accepted into the scholarship program. And so, even before classes started, we all met. We all got to meet on campus, have lunch, do an activity together. And I got to meet all these wonderful students who were just coming into school too. They were blind just like me. They didn't have, any support. They were far away from home. And then along with, having other youth like me, you were set up with someone like a faculty member on campus as your mentor. And that person is, to give you that adult guidance that you probably didn't get most of your life. And, so Jen is, she was an economics professor, and she stuck with me all through college. She was the kind of person, she was young, so she always wanted to move to different states, do different jobs with like her family and her kiddos. And I said, that's fine, I support you, but you have to stick with me until I graduate, until I get my degree. You can't leave me. And so she did. Even when I graduated with my bachelor's, she still stuck around for my master's. So that she was really my first stable person in my life, and I am highly grateful for her to this day for that. I made friends along the way. I ended up really reconnecting with my birth mom, talked to my siblings over the phone. So in the beginning it was very rough, but as time went on, my support system started to grow, shrink, and then to just get stronger.
Awesome. College is hard. College is difficult. Nonetheless, to come to college already carrying, if I can say, baggage of, dang, I'm supposed to be doing this and taking this walk with parents beside me. Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to have a family that's supporting me and stuff like that. And it's unfortunate when us as foster youth, because I went through this process. Us as foster youth are taking those steps, taking those adult measures where there are big moments where you want family there, and then they're not there to show up. And I commend you for not just only getting your bachelor's, but going on to get your master's. You have beaten the odds, and you have, beaten the statistics. I'm pretty sure the statistics of graduates from high school, nonetheless, the graduates from college, so congratulations on that. I'm proud of you, and I'm glad to know you. Now, I believe, we met at a Shadow Day experience with NFYI, and that was a pretty cool experience. But I also, a little bit of your story that I got in context, you've had a unique work history. You got to work in some residentials, I believe, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong. And so forth. And now you're working in a behavioral health facility or so forth. I don't know if I'm using the proper term for that.
Yeah.
But okay. So if you could walk me through your experience, being a foster care alumni, an adoptee, going and working for a residential facility. How did that feel? How did that work out? And what was that experience like?
It was very rewarding at times. It was so tough because you would get these kids and it's like, they are capable of greatness. That, they've experienced horrible things. You hear their stories and, you think back to, where you were then. You remember being, in that tough spot where, you're struggling so hard with all these big emotions that you can't even put names to yet. And you don't feel like you have anyone there. You feel like you don't have any support, and you feel like life isn't worth living for. And then you think, well, look at where I'm at now. And you try and teach these kids, like, on a professional level, that, you can make it, you can get there, because I did. But, you have to remember that not everyone has the same story as you. Not everyone has the same experiences as you. Even if they do, they're not going to feel and think and act the same way that you do. So, by creating those personal boundaries with the kids I worked with, and like having those professional boundaries, but also, being very empathetic, um, you know, it was just being someone that they could count on, being someone that, was a constant support in their life while they were there. Um, we weren't supposed to have any communication with them until 2 years after they left, which was really tough because, I would get like messages or like Facebook requests and, so, I would kind of check their profiles every once in a while, see how they were doing, watching these kids grow up and graduate from college, be single parents, made me really proud because the thought of feeling like maybe you had a little bit to do with it always like made all the hard days worth it, where they would kick you, punch you, call you names, tell you they hated you, AWOL from the facility, and you had to chase them down through the woods and bring them back even though that they wanted to escape. Seeing them go through court cases and come out crying and not getting to where they wanted to be, it made all those worth it.
Awesome. I thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you know too much about my story, but like I have experience working in juvenile facilities and residential facilities, group homes, and transitional housing programs. So like this is like CCIs. It's like my niche.
Yeah.
Along with advocacy, because I've been doing them both about the same amount of time. But that is my niche, and what I do and what I know, and I know how rewarding it can be. I've been a part of NYOY, and I don't know if you know what NYOY is. Okay.
Yeah, I was a part of it.
Okay, we gonna get into that too. So I've been a part of NYOY. I actually had the unique experience. I was working at this one residential, and I actually was involved with NYOY. And so most of my kiddos who were in my part of the facility and stuff like that I ran were in NYOI. And it was cool because look, this is the cool part about it. So like they were trying to find stuff. I'm like, look, I can take them. So I'm gonna take them. Now I'm getting paid two jobs because you get paid with NYOI, and then I'm getting paid because I'm on the clock too. But that was an awesome experience, and I say that to say this, like my kiddos, I was working with mostly transition age youth. So from like that 14 to like 17, sometimes 18 or more. So I was very real with them, and I like to think my realness kind of helped. I started out probably around 19, 21, so in there. So like I wasn't too far from where they were, and I would tell them like, these are the statistics that you guys have to fight against, along with the generational things that probably is with your family and so forth. And I didn't think, you never know what sticks, I remember going to like a Pistons game, NYY does that. They used to do that. And like two of my kiddos were like, hey, Mr. DT, how you doing, man? Everything. It was very exciting to see them. They were like, look, I just want to tell you, man, look, I made it. I've been out for a minute or so. I ain't never going back. And I just want you to know that what you told me resonated with me, and I'm just gonna make something out of myself, and that was a very nice moment, and I ended up, before COVID happened and changed the Pistons thing, ended up seeing them the next year at the Pistons thing too. So it was really cool to see like they kept their work, that they said, they did stay out, they still trying to work hard, and they're still trying to do what they got to do, so I can understand and resonate with you when you say it can be very rewarding, but also you also get into that place as an alumni, you like, it is what I'm doing here helping, you
Yeah.
know. So I had been there too. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Um, Now you said you were a part of NYLY, so like, how did that help and how did that support you throughout your time?
So I actually didn't become a part of MYOI until I was, goodness, I want to say like 20. It might have been a little bit older, a little bit younger, but something that really was tough growing up in the system is, you aren't told about all these services and resources and things that are available to foster youth until you're too old to, enjoy it or take advantage of it or utilize it. And so, I went through the first, goodness, what was it, like 2 years of college without MYOI. And then finally, I ended up figuring out about it and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, more people like me, So once I was a part of it, it was really amazing because, you know, you have these classes where, you can go for the day and you learn about new coping skills, or like I know days there was a day where we made like slime or like glitter jars or like, things that we could use when we're stressed. And it was always like with household items you would have around or cheap things. So, she always made it super beneficial to us. Um, there were times where we went ice skating or sledding. We went to a water park during the summer. And it was like having this big family. And when you went to these things, yeah, you got kind of like an allowance, and it went straight into your bank account. So it was kind of like a gift because, you're getting this money that you can save up for, books for the next semester, or, maybe for some bills or to like get new clothing items. Or they even helped you with that. They would help you get clothing. They would help you get like laundry detergent. I know we did have some girls who were seniors in high school, and you know, some of us older girls were like, oh, well, I still have dresses from like prom and homecoming. And so we brought them all in, and the younger girls got to do like a fashion show because like their school dances were coming up. So it was kind of like being able to like give back or like, be a support that you wish you had been. And it just really helped. Unfortunately, I didn't get to participate as much and as long as I wanted to. But it was like a very impactful, organization. And I really wish I would have known about it sooner.
And that's great, because even though you weren't involved that long,
Mhm.
it sounds like what you got out of it was enough,
Mhm.
and that much more, just the realization that you're not alone itself, could be, great. I remember my first MYOI meeting. I was in residential and so forth. So the county that I joined, they really didn't allow residential kids to do it because of different things that had happened in the past. So they typically
Yeah.
tried to, approach youth that had been out of residential or, in foster homes and so forth. But somehow I slid through there.
Good.
And I remember our first one was a hygiene, was like a hygiene and like self-care kind of asset training that was ran by a couple of youth that were on there. And
Mhm.
I just remember being wrapped around with support and just like I walked into the room and you could just feel, like these is my people.
Yeah.
And that was just really awesome. Um, but moving along, my audience gonna get on me, about bouncing around and stuff like that. But man, now you're working at the behavioral health facility. You're essentially doing like case management, social work. you know um Give me a little bit about that experience. How is that going and so forth?
Oh, it is tough. So we are considered a short-term stabilization, like acute facility. So
Okay.
we have patients that come in, and their stay could be anywhere between 5 to 10 days, but that only honestly is really focused on adults. We do have kids, we do have adolescents. Our age is anywhere between 3 years old to, you know, you could be like 70 something, but the only thing that would prevent someone from a much older age coming to our facility is if they had a bunch of health issues, because we are not equipped to meet those needs, unfortunately. And so I think the toughest part of that job is being able to discharge plan day one, because you never know how long a patient's going to stay right off the bat. I've had patients that were only there for a day and a half. I've had patients that were there for months. And everyone's different. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's reasonings for being there is different. But, kind of keeping along with, foster kids and the system, we get kids like that. We get kids who maybe weren't even in the system, and they come to our facility because they're having behavioral issues. They're struggling with maybe some trauma or, an undiagnosed disorder. And, maybe they're showing a lot of aggression at home. And once they start to become a little more stabilized, us as social workers, we call home and, we're like, well, once they're ready to leave, like, they're able to come home, right? And when a parent is like, no, like, I don't feel safe with them returning home. And we have to kind of go over the protocol of what is considered a lockout. And that consists of, calling DCFS, which is, CPS or, so our kids will be there anywhere between, a couple weeks to months. I have some kids in the hospital that have been there since last May, because placement is just so hard. So, they try to keep, it within the family, like an aunt or something. But once they do like the investigation, or they do like house checks, maybe something comes up and they can't. So then it's trying to find them residential. It's trying to find them a foster home, and it's just tough to see these kids, stuck in this stabilization acute facility, because we're a locked facility. They get to go outside maybe, well, not right now because it's winter, but maybe they get to go out, a couple times a week, but it's like in a fenced in area. There's only so many activities they can do. During the winter, they get to go down to the gym, but again, it's only a couple days a week. And, they're doing the same groups over and over again because we recycle through these things. And so it's tough to see these kids just sitting in this hospital for something that wasn't even their fault, most of the time, and it never really is their fault. Yeah, they may have behavioral issues, but there's always a cause for that. There's always something that has, rendered them from, behaving in what is considered a sociable, like, right way.
Right. Man, you gave me so much there to think on, and I just like, wow. Because essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, your facility is not meant for holding essentially foster youth that are that are trying to figure out a place to go.
No, but we
So
have
somehow in that system, they have, it sounds like a loophole in order to give them more time to figure out a placement.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And DCFS has been sued like previously by, I think, parents. I haven't really read into it, but I saw, a couple years ago or something, there was like a court case going on because DCFS is using us as a holding ground. They're using not even just us, but like other psychiatric hospitals, in the area. They're using them as holding grounds for these kids rather than trying to find them placements. Or even if it's like, not neglect and it's not, doing their job, it's there's not enough placements. I see some of our workers in the hospital who work specifically with our DCFS kids, trying to find these kids residential, even just in the same state as us. But, one of my friends, one of her kiddos is going to a residential in Tennessee, because that's what's available. That's what, they're able to take this kiddo. So it's the system is tough, and then trying to push it on other systems who aren't equipped for this just makes it even more tough on everyone.
Right. And I know not just, here in Michigan, but across the country, there's been different bills and stuff that was passed along the same time as like Family First and stuff like that, the Family First Act, to put stipulation on residential facilities and so forth. And a lot of those places, a lot of those states held out until the last minute, and they're just now, putting those stipulations down, and they're cracking down on residential facilities. I know a lot have closed in Michigan because it just was too much for them to reform, and to adapt to. But for the ones that are still open, I as a person I've worked for residentials, I know we would never get rid of residentials. They do serve a purpose. But also I know that there's a lot of changes that need to happen, and I get, residential essentially is a business, but, there's lives at hand. And I've seen people just get, try to get people in beds and try to get the money because of having kids in beds and stuff like that. And I also, just seeing like us taking kids that just wasn't equipped for what we were trying to do. Like I remember, when I was working at a residential, for just the sake of it, I'm not gonna say their name, but I was working for a residential, and we took on a kid that was deaf, mute, and autistic, and he needed a CNA nonetheless, and other supports around the clock. And unfortunately, me and a couple other staff like worked CNA jobs and had our CNA certificate, but like that was not in our job description,
No.
and then we end up getting a kid that was mute and only spoke sign language, didn't really know how to like write or anything like that either, and we only had one staff on campus that knew sign language. So it just like, I've experienced residentials taking people and facilities taking people that they're not equipped for just for money, really, just for money, and forcing the staff that are unequipped to burn out, by working in that high stressed environment that they did not sign on for. And I can even speak, from experience, when you're in that position where, you got to pay your bills, you are afraid to say no, because they will fire you. There's no support there, as a youth care worker and so forth. But that's a little bit about that. I ain't gonna dive deep in that because that's a whole another podcast in itself. But man, it's just very interesting to see, and hear the brokenness that, it's nationwide. It is nationwide. The brokenness is nationwide. There's cracks. There's, I like to call, how people, you fill in those potholes and they only had that temporary stuff in it. And
just like sand and rocks.
Yeah. Right. And by that time next year, the pothole is bigger, So I feel like that's what happens. Like we put Band-Aids and a little bit of like temporary filler into some of these issues and never fix the problem. And by the time we get it back around to the problem, it's bigger. It's bigger than what we started with.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's not one right answer about the brokenness, but I'm a person, we need to start talking about it. We need to bring more youth voice to the table. We need to focus on the prevention, focus on the reforms that need to happen, get into these facilities and have more check and balances with these facilities to make sure that they're training and they're equipping these, young staff, because these facilities target college students because they know they need the money, so young adults, and I'm not saying that's just all, but I in my experience, it was a lot of young people that are fresh out of college working in these facilities. And that's okay, but train them. Make sure that they're trauma informed so they don't go off on a kid, so they know how to properly manage their emotions and separate a kid cussing them out from, and be able to appreciate those situations. So yeah, I just, thank you for that. And I just have a couple last questions. I know your time is precious. You're a busy woman. So we just talked about, what's currently happening for you. And I kind of want to ask, because you know how it is for social workers, and so forth, heavy caseloads, crazy, balances and everything. How are you dealing with your mental health and sustaining with that, if anything?
Well, that's a tough one. Because, I feel that, like you said, like being fresh out of college and, needing to pay bills, and, I feel that even now. I don't want to say no. I my job is technically 9 to 5, and there's most nights where I'm there from anywhere between 6:30 and 8, and I'm salary, so I don't get paid for those hours, after 5 o'clock. So that's all, out of my free time. But then at the same time, I don't feel like I can leave at 5 o'clock because, caseloads are so big. We have, when a social worker gets sick and they leave, someone else has to take over their caseload, or when someone, quits because they found a better opportunity where they get less caseloads and they get more pay, that we don't get, then we have to take on their caseload. And so, in one day your caseload could be 11 and the next day it's like 18, and that might not seem like a lot, but it is. Even just one added case, opens a whole new thing. So just really trying to be able to practice time management, prioritize. When I get in the morning, I really try and kind of create a to-do list, like, well, these are the things I have to get done, and if I have time, well, these are some things that I should do. Really practicing on saying no, not taking on extra work, asking for help, from my other colleagues, from my director, from my supervisor, like maybe I'm struggling with a case and I need some advice, and then when I get home, taking time to relax and not worrying about work. Don't bring it home with me, leave it at the door when I leave the hospital. And just when I do get home, taking the time to relax, doing things that I like reading, or some people, when they get off work, they don't want to cook dinner, they want to go out and eat. I really like cooking dinner when I get home. I like sitting down at my table and like chopping up my veggies and like watching a show while I'm doing it, or maybe listening to music. And, that's soothing to me. Cooking and baking has always been a really good stress reliever for me. So just making sure I'm doing the things that relax me, and, self-care. That is shoved in your brain day one of college and social work, and just trying to muster up enough energy to practice my self-care.
Awesome. And I got Sorry, it just came to my mind. I got another question, you know.
I will take it.
You know, so I think it's important, you know, and I don't. Hopefully, you'll be able to answer this question. But I want to kind of help the listeners understand what does it mean, you know, with caseloads. Like, what does a caseload look like? Because it's kind of hard for people that's not social work to be like, oh, okay, I don't understand why, you know, she ain't doing her job. Like, why she keep telling me, oh, she got like all these other cases. Like, I don't care about all that, you know. You know, so it's kind of hard for somebody that's not in this field to kind of comprehend that. So if you can give me a depiction of what all entails when you are working with one case, you know.
Okay, so when you know, a kid or adult first comes in,
Okay.
so when they first come in, depending whether they're a walk-in, a transfer from another hospital, come from a residential, whatever, they come in, our emergency services does an intake. A lot of the time it's very small. There's not a lot of information. We try and get information from where they came from if we can. And then within the 24-hour, 48-hour window, depending if they come on the weekend or not, we try and get in and do what is a psychosocial assessment. So that's all their history that we do, you know, a suicide assessment, you know, if they've had suicidal ideations, which are thoughts, you know, within the year, 6 months, how many times maybe they have attempted, when was the last time, self-harm. You know, we really focus on the safety of them and others. So go ahead.
Just interject right there. So when you are getting like the psychosocial stuff, you're directly talking with the client to get this information?
Yes,
or
if we can.
If you can, so yeah, you guys got that. Just want to make sure as the listeners, because I've kind of like been there when, you know, some of these things are getting worked on, like a psychosocial and stuff like that. And if you got a defiant client or a non-receptive client, it's really hard to get that done, and that takes away more time. I just wanted to chime that in. So keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so like I said, if you can, you know, there are times where you'll get a patient. I've had patients who are catatonic, which means that they don't like to speak, or they can't, you know, maybe they have auditory hallucinations where they're hearing voices and things, and all that's all they can focus on. And so they're mute, you know, they aren't moving or anything, you know. So getting back to the psychosocial, you know, we do a suicide assessment. We kind of figure out, you know, their hospital history, you know, if this is their first hospitalization, if not, you know, where were they previously? What was it for? How long ago was it? We try to find out if they have any psychiatrists, therapists, or even just, you know, your normal practitioner outside of the hospital. And then we look into their education history, you know, see, you know, if they've got their high school diploma, their GED. We look at employment, if they have, you know, Social Security, disability, what the disability is. We look at like their family history, where they live, who they live with. If they don't live somewhere, then that opens another whole can of worms where, you know, if they're homeless, it's like, okay, well, what can we do to help? You know, and there's only so many limited things we can do for these people if they don't have a place to live, unfortunately, because we are an acute short-term stabilization. You know, like I said way back in the beginning, you know, 5 to 10 days trying to find placement. And so then we go into, you know, trauma, abuse, and it's real tough, you know, trying to kind of get that information and not being able to really talk about that and just asking them questions. So it's like opening wounds and like, okay, well, thanks for the information, bye. Like, I try not to do that because that's tough, you know. And then kind of just figuring out like a little bit more about them, like what their stressors are, what do they consider their strengths and weaknesses to be, what are their hobbies, you know, who's in their support system, what are their goals while they're here. So that's just in the first meeting with them.
Okay.
And then going from there, like I said, discharge planning starts from day one. So if they don't have a psychiatrist or a therapist, asking them if they prefer a male or female, figuring out what places are available to them where they live, and if they take the insurance. So calling places, making appointments for them, setting up assessments outside. And then when it comes to finding the placement, creating packets, sending referral packets out to these places, communicating with these places. So, this is just the first couple days that they're there, and if, they sign what is called a 5-day, that means you got 5 days and that's it to get all this done. So, think about doing this with, just even 5 people. And you got 5 days out of the week to do it. And, it seems like, oh, well, you could just focus on one person every day. Okay, maybe, so, but then you need to do, your check-ins with them. Maybe they got denied somewhere. Well, now you got to go tell them. And so then that turns into a whole, 20 to 30 minute conversation. And then if they have family, you try and get them to sign a release of information and, call their family members and maybe get their input on, whatever brought them in and history. And so it's just a whole thing. And I'm probably leaving a lot out, but I also gave you a lot. I don't want to overwhelm you.
No, it's perfectly. I did one of my internships with Genesee Health Systems and got to explore their whole process. And it's not a hospital in itself, but they service as a community mental health, facility center, whichever. But they have so many things, in facets. Like there's literally everything. They do it if it's surrounded around mental health. So like I had to do the whole works myself. So most of the terminology you're saying, I get and I understand. That's a lot. That is a lot. And like, is there times where like you get a person because it is like you're working on that discharge, you get a person and they leave before you can get some of that stuff done?
Yeah, they can't technically sign themselves out. I know in like, some people think when you go into a psychiatric hospital, it's a 72-hour hold and then you can leave. That's not how it is here. We do the thing where it's called a 5-day and they sign the form and it doesn't count from the day that they showed up. So say they've already been there 3-4 days and they sign the 5-day on day 4. Well, those other 3 days don't count. That 5 days starts from the day they sign it. And weekends for adults, weekends and holidays don't count either. So if they signed it on a Thursday, it's not up until next Thursday, and so I forgot what the question was.
I was just asking, is there any time that people leave before you can get most of the things that you needed in that case case note, case file, whichever, done as far as like psychosocial and stuff like that? Because I can imagine if you get a person that come in one day and they go, they gone the next day, by the afternoon, like, how does that work?
Not necessarily. So like I said, the psychosocial needs to be done within 24 to 72 hours for the psychosocial. So you have to get it done within 3 days, like from when they show up. That has to be done. Okay. If you do have a patient who is catatonic and won't talk to you, if you can try and get a double verbalization to speak with a family member, that's even more helpful because you can call a family member or a friend or someone to get that history to finish that. If that is not an option, you still have to complete the psychosocial assessment, but you can only fill in, maybe what you got from like the intake assessment or from like the hospital they transferred from. All the other information you don't know, you have to put unable to obtain. And once the patient comes out of their catatonic state, then you go back and you like start from, that that day one, but on the
Okay.
sidelines, you're really trying to do everything you can to help prepare them for discharge. So once they come out of that state, you have something, but it's hard when they don't communicate, or, if you have a kid who's being defiant, or someone who's like, I don't need to be here, I don't want to be here, I'm not talking to you. You can only do so much with what you're given.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Like, I appreciate that deep dive. I my last couple, things are more so statements that you can give to the listeners. You've been doing this for a minute, so I kind of wanted to know if you could give us a little bit of advice, and that advice starting, for foster care, youth, and alumni, for young professionals, and for people that are social workers or going to be social workers, and so forth. What advice could you give those three different categories?
For all of them, really, it applies to all of them, is never be afraid to ask for help. Whether it's from, your caseworker or your foster parents or siblings or your birth parents. Don't be afraid to ask for help from your colleagues, from, your supervisor. It's not easy. And unfortunately, like we've discussed, the system's broken. And, maybe there's someone who knows a little bit more than you do about something, and that's okay. The best way to learn about something is being educated from someone else. And the best person to be educated from, is someone who you can talk to and relate to, because they'll have a better, mindset than what like the internet or a textbook would. Some other advice would be to always advocate for yourself, as a foster kid, but also advocate for yourself as a social worker. Say no, ask for time off when you need. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to take a breather, because then if you don't, that's when you burn out. It's advocating for your foster youth, advocating for your patients, getting them the resources they need, really digging in for that information for what can be beneficial to them. So, they have something like MYOI when they're young, and they can have that, while they're transitioning or aging out, or, whatever the situation be. Finding financial resources that can help them when they go to college, if that's what they if that's what they choose. There's so much advice I could give.
Thank you. You gave us a lot of information, and you opened your heart up, and shared bits and pieces of your story, and I can only thank you so much. I appreciate you being on here. I appreciate you providing that advice, but also, sharing from your experience and expertise, because believe it or not, you are an expert in your field, you are, and so forth. And I can't leave this without asking this last question. So you have your MSW. Now, is there somewhere in the future you're gonna go for your doctorate, or, you just like, look, I did enough school?
I don't know. So I thought about going back for my doctorates eventually, but there's also so much I want to do. I want to go to school for policy. I want to go to school, to get some criminal justice background. I want to go to school, maybe for psychiatry. The world is my oyster, and I have so many things that I could do. So maybe one day I'll get my doctorates, or maybe I'll go back to school for additional stuff and my doctorates. Who knows? I'm still young.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I would definitely love to have you back, once you've enter into those arena of your goals that you're trying to achieve and chase after. I know you are not finished, and you got a lot left to go. And I'm excited to see what your journey looks like, as you continue going forward. But thank you guys for tuning in. This is Resilient Voices and Beyond. I hope you have a great day, a great night, a great evening, a great whenever. uh, be safe out there. COVID is going crazy. There's so many different variants going along. I know there's a lot of different things going on with vaccine. I want to get vaccinated, or I'm scared to be vaccinated, or I don't believe in the vaccine. I'm not here to be political. Be safe. Wear a mask, sanitize, take precautions, get the vaccine if you want to get the vaccine. But most of all, just be safe and be considerate. We all are human beings. We got to take care of one another. We are each other's village. So with love, you guys have a great whenever. And this is Resilient Voices and Beyond.